Hello, everybody. This is the Fights Tonight podcast. I am Travis Bohemus here with Luis Romero. Luis, what's going on?
Not a whole lot, Travis. Just getting ready for the fights tomorrow.
Same here, brother. Luis, of course, anybody who remembers last week is back from his trip to Oregon.
Yeah.
Still on the journey to make 145 for his MMA fight in July. And I was just joking about that with him 2 days ago. And now I have to make 145 later today for
Travis.
a jiu-jitsu tournament tomorrow.
Yeah, he's making his debut.
Jiu-jitsu debut. So that'll
Mhm.
be two combat sports done this year. We can get a boxing match before the end. That'll be Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, and boxing. So just so you guys know, we're not just breaking down fights and watching them. We're trying to provide some entertainment ourselves too. We will break down last week's picks and some boxing a little bit later, but for right now, we are going to start with the big fights happening this weekend, which of course is the UFC 275 pay-per-view card headed by Jiri Prochazka and Glover Teixeira for Teixeira's light heavyweight belt, and Valentina Shevchenko putting her flyweight title on the line against Talia Santos. And then, of course, the featured event will be Zhang versus Joanna in a rematch of last year's Fight of the Year. But we will start off on the early prelims. This being in Singapore, it has a lot of European and Asian fighters that some of you like us may not be super familiar with. We have Ramona Pascual versus Jocelyn Edwards, and then a women's strawweight bout, Liang Na versus Silvana Gomez Juarez. And that brings us to the normal prelims, which is started off by Kang Kyung Ho versus Danae Batgarel. And I'm pretty good with names, but I'm pretty sure I messed those up. Lewis, do you have a pick for that fight?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I missed that one. I didn't see that earlier. I didn't know these guys were fighting. I got the ones after that, but
Okay, for anybody that knows, the prelim card got shaken up a little bit. I believe that Kyung Ho and Batgarel was on the early prelims, but got bumped up. For anybody who hasn't seen the headlines, the fight between Rogerio Bontorin and Manel Cape just got scrapped. I haven't read the article to see why, but that will no longer be on the main card. So Jack Della, uh, we'll just call him M, and Ramazan Emiv got bumped up to the main card. So a good chance for both of them to stand out and get some more eyes on them. What was supposed to be the first fight on the prelims was Brendan Allen versus Jacob Malkoon at middleweight. Allen is 18-5 with a little more experience. Jacob Malkoon 6-1, more on the way up. Any thoughts on that fight?
any fights on? Oh boy, yes. Brandon Allen. He's nine. He's 9 fights in the UFC. 7 of those wins were in the UFC. 2 were losses.
I didn't realize he had that many.
Yeah, but my prediction for this fight, with Brandon and Jacob both being good on the ground, it's hard. It's hard to tell. Brandon's by far the better striker and definitely the most rounded fighter. I think if Brandon can manage to stay on top when it goes to the ground, he'll take home the win. I don't see Brandon getting submitted. It wouldn't surprise me if Jacob did. The odds of Brandon KOing Jacob are slim, but could happen. I see this fight going to split decision. Though hard to say who will win, but my money's on Brandon.
Nice. Possible fight of the night there, it sounds like. And at lightweight, we have another name that's going to put my reading to the test. We have Steve Garcia, who is 12-4, taking on Hai Sire Maheshate. And I apologize if I got that wrong, which by the betting man I am, I would say I did get that wrong. He is 8-1. Lewis, what do you think between these two lightweights?
Ooh, this one's gonna be a good fight. My Sate, he's the first Chinese fighter to win a contract on Dana White's Contender Series.
Nice.
He beat I'm gonna butcher this name too, Archelius Estemaduro with a split decision. That was a super exciting fight. I looked a couple times like he got rocked, but it didn't phase him too much. He has a really good chin, and it seemed like as the fight, as the rounds went on, he got better. And with Steve Garcia, he showed great defense submission against Luis Pena, and that was a few fights ago. And he almost even had a triangle submission in round 3 against them. His BJJ offense doesn't look too great. I have a feeling this one's going to it's going to be a banger. I think this fight's going to be a stand-up match. I can see either fighter getting this one. If if uh, if Steve is going to get it, I can see it happening in the first 2 rounds. But I can also see my Shate getting in any of the rounds. If I had to choose one, it would have to be my Shate. I really like his style. He's a fighter that gets better.
As the fight goes on.
Exactly.
Yeah, he seems like a tough guy. That brings us to the main event of the prelims, if you will, which is Joshua Kulabao, 9-1-1, versus Choi Seung Woo. I'm going to guess by that name that he is Korean, but I could be off on that.
You are right. He is Korean.
10-4. These guys are at featherweight, which means there'll be a little bit more action. What do you think on these two?
Well, I don't know much about Sang Woo Choi, but Josh, he has a really good rear head kick, and he likes attacking the calves. He's a decent striker and has good takedown and cage defense. When he fought against Shailin, I'm going to butcher this again, Neuro Dun Break, who's an outstanding wrestler from China. You can see this. But if I'm going to have to bet, it'd have to be on Josh. Just because I don't know much about the other guy.
Okay. I actually like the style of the Korean fighters. They tend to be really well-rounded, kind of like the Korean Zombie, where he gets knockouts, but will also pull off a weird submission here and there. So I would look for him to be real tough. For anybody that's listened to us before or plans to listen to us in the future, I assure you, me and Lewis can read. With this being a Singapore card, this is about as tough as it's going to get as far as people's names. So that brings us to the beginning of the main card, where of course we lost that Bonchar and Kate fight. So it will be started off by Jack Della Maddalena versus Ramazan Emeev at welterweight. Looks like. What are your thoughts on this one, Rose?
This one. It's looking at Jack's ears. It makes me wonder how good his jiu-jitsu is. His last 2 fights in the UFC, he won by KO, TKO. I think Ramazan is a bigger opponent than Jack's last fight. I wonder how he's going to do with the size difference. I think with the way Jack pumps his jabs, it's going to be easy for Ramazan to get his takedowns. Jack is the favorite in this fight, but I'm not sure if he has the knockout power to put Ramazan away, especially with how tough Ramazan's chin is. If this fight stays on the feet, it should be Jack's to win. But if it goes to the ground, I'm leaning towards Ramazan. This is another hard fight for me to call.
Okay, and that brings us to another welterweight fight where we have Andre Filo versus Jake Matthews. Looks like the records are actually surprisingly similar. At Filo 16-4 with 1 no contest, Matthews at 17-5. Filo I know I've seen once or twice, nothing that really stands out. Jake Matthews I remember seeing being pretty impressed with his tenacity. What do you think on these two, Lewis? Got any info or picks? Filo versus Matthews.
Let's see. This fight, I'm going to have to give it to Jake Matthews. He's the more seasoned fighter in the UFC. I see this possibly going to split decision. I see Matthews getting a few easy takedowns and keeping it on the ground like he usually does. I don't think this will be a very exciting fight. Honestly, who cares? It's gotten Matthews this far. If I was him, I'd keep doing what he's been doing, and he should win.
Okay, that brings us to our featured bout of the night, which is Zhang Weili versus Joanna and Jacek, both of them former champions in this weight class, strawweight, which is 115 pounds. Of course, their fight last time wasn't only fight of the year, but was a 5-round fight. and was for the title. Anybody that remembers, Zhang Weili won, although it was a very close fight, and Joanna had that horrible swelling on her head. Um, Joanna, they've both been in a real different spot since that fight happened. Joanna's kind of worked way back up, but has fought perhaps a little bit lesser competition. Whereas immediately following that fight, Zhang Weili had two back-to-back fights with Rose Namajunas. One where she got caught with a left head kick, which was kind of a bummer only because it was a defensive move with her hips that you'll see Sanchai do a lot is actually how she got caught. It was early in the fight. She thought Rose was throwing a lead leg kick to the inside of Zhang Weili's lead leg. So she went to sway her hips back like Sanchai did, didn't have her right hand up high enough and got caught with the left head kick. Didn't put her out, but was enough to put her on the ground. And as everyone knows, the 115 pounders, especially Rose, are very quick and very accurate. And by the time she, was able to sit up and get her wits about her, Rose was on her, and they stopped the fight, rightfully so. However, not only because of Zhang being very talented, but kind of in what's been a bit of a tradition for Rose Namajunas, she seems to do really good in her first fight against people. It's like her speed and her setups really surprises people. And then in her second fight, she has a much harder time. It's the way it was not only with Zhang Weili, but oddly enough, against the other competitor in this fight, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. If you remember, she won the title from Joanna about 6 years back and got a TKO really early in the fight. In her second fight, went all 5 rounds. It was closer, exactly the same as it was with Zhang Weili. So even though Weili has lost her last two fights, if you take out the one where she got caught quick with that kick, she pretty much always brings it. In that last fight with Rose, Rose won, but it was really close. The cool thing with these girls is normally they would be in a tough spot, both having fought and lost to Rose Namajunas twice. However, if you remember Rose Namajunas in one of our rare picks that we've gotten wrong since we started our podcast, Carla Esparza took the belt from Rose Namajunas in their rematch. Been getting a lot of rematches lately up at the higher end of this weight class. And it was a really boring fight. It was really close, but they gave it to Esparza. The cool thing about that is that Zhang Weili hasn't fought her, so she's got a better chance of getting a title shot against her than she would a third fight against Rose. And same thing for Joanna. In fact, Carla Esparza, who has the belt now, is who Joanna got her belt from back in the day. Um, if you remember, they had an Ultimate Fighter that ended with a title. It was Rose and Carla Esparza in the finals. Carla Esparza won and then immediately lost the belt to Joanna, which is when her reign as champion started. So while normally these girls would be in a bit of a tough spot if Rose kept the belt, it's actually going to mix up the division and maybe give us some fresh matchups. The fact that Esparza has it. The other thing that's strange about this fight is this will be a 3-round fight, whereas normally if you have two people, that are in the top five, have a fight of the year, similar to Shogun and Henderson back in the day, they try to make the rematch for a 5-round fight as well. I can't really say that benefits one over the other. Joanna's definitely a marathon fighter. She's not really looking to come out and put you in the dust in the first couple minutes, and she's able to keep a good pace and technique throughout the entire fight. And obviously, with Zhang Weili having so many good fights that went the distance, she's kind of the same. She comes out a little bit harder, but also is able to keep it up. If anything, I felt like Zhang Weili's power was getting to Joanna towards the end of the fight, but I also felt like it took Zhang Weili a little bit to get into it. Whereas I think Joanna knows because of her lack of power that she needs to set a high pace and get it going off the bat. So I think this fight will play out a little bit different. I don't necessarily see it being a finish, but I see both girls being such such a different spot than they were in their career compared to last time. Joanna on the way back up and Zhang Weili not having the belt and coming off two straight losses. I see them coming out and looking to make things happen a little bit more. So even though this is 3 rounds, I see this one perhaps being a little bit more exciting and not in the way that their first fight was. If I had to guess, I would say Zhang Weili will get it, even though she is shorter. She doesn't have quite as many miles on her, and Joanna seemed to be lighting her up a bit with the jabs and some of the front kicks and stuff, but Wiley, you could tell her right hand stuff was really making a difference. And Wiley has continued to work over in Thailand at a new gym. Anyone that's been watching her for the last couple of years knows she has some really good traditional Muay Thai fighters in her corner as her striking coach. And every time I see her, she looks better and a little bit more crisp and stuff. So I'm really curious to see it, especially seeing as how Joanna herself used to be a Muay Thai champion. So that should be an interesting fight. Wouldn't be surprised if it went either way. I'm leaning towards Wiley, and I could see Wiley perhaps getting a finish. Obviously, there's a chance she gets caught with a kick quick the way that Rose got her, but I see this one going the distance, and I'm leaning towards Zhang Wiley, but it's definitely a 55-45 type scenario. Lewis, what do you think on this women's strawweight fight, which I believe has been said it's the number one contenders fight? So whoever wins, I believe, does get the title shot against Esparza.
I'm gonna have to agree with you. I think Zhang Wei, I think she's gonna win. With her training in Thailand, I seen that she was also training at Evolve MMA. I'm pretty sure that's in Singapore. I would like her. I would like to see her use some of the wrestling that she used on Rose in the last fight. After training with Henry Cejudo, I think if she did that in this fight, I think she would take less damage. And Joanna, she's not the most offensive on the ground, so she'd be pretty safe. I think if she can do that, she definitely has it in the bag. With her training at Evolve MMA too, who knows? Maybe we'll see like a Mikey Musumeci submission or something. That'd be pretty neat, huh?
Yes, it would. That is a good point that Lewis raises. Joanna does have good takedown defense up against the cage, like most American top team fighters, but isn't really known for getting much for finishes on the ground. And I've seen her controlled a couple times, usually by bigger fighters, like when she went up and fought Valentina. But still, definitely possible somebody as physically strong as Zhang Weili is. Um, but it sounds like me and Lewis are in agreement on that. Definitely gives Wiley a better chance if she takes it to the ground, but a more exciting fight if they stand. That will bring us to our co-main event and the first title fight of the night, which is for the women's flyweight title at 125, which is Talia Santos, 19-1, challenging Valentina Shevchenko, who is 22-3, for the title that she has held on to pretty consistently, hasn't really faced much adversity. She used to be at 135, where of course she had some very close matches with Amanda Nunes. But since she's come down to 125, she practically immediately captured the belt and has had a string of really dominant performances and quite a few finishes. Talia Santos, on the other hand, is a fighter that isn't moving up from 115 when things get stale the way that Joanna did, and isn't killing herself trying to come down from 135 to get away from Nunes. She actually seems like she belongs in the weight class and yet has a good frame for it. I believe she will be as tall and as long as Valentina, if not a little bit more rangy. She does have a good record, has good power. Coming from Brazil, she's no stranger to jiu-jitsu. Um, she's had some impressive fights. The one that stands out for me is against. Trying to remember the girl's name from Scotland. Let me pull it up here. Yes, Joanne Wood. And she got a submission in the first round, but that was after hurting her on the feet. Of course, she had a decision win over Roxanne Modafferi, one over Jillian Robertson, one over Molly McCann. So she is experienced and has fought, some of the kind of mainstays in the weight class. The thing that concerns me is not only, it being her first title fight, but also um, maybe not having faced as much adversity as Valentina Shevchenko has. Not that Shevchenko gets hurt in her fights, but even though the records are similar, I think Shevchenko definitely has more experience. Talia Santos, like Shevchenko, comes from a kickboxing background, but in that as well, Valentina kind of went to a higher level. Something that I learned while watching countdowns and embeddeds and researching for this fight that I didn't know before is that the mother of Valentina and her sister is very high up, and I believe is the president of the Muay Thai Association in Kyrgyzstan. So that shows you how deep Muay Thai runs in her family. As a multiple-time Muay Thai world champion. In fact, before the UFC, Joanna and Valentina had fought each other 3 separate times in Muay Thai fights.
What?
And yeah, I know. I was kind of shocked to hear about that too. I remember them throwing that set out when they fought each other. Of course, Valentina was just a little bit too big and a little bit too strong for Joanna. Um, the other thing that makes this one a little extra interesting is that it'll be an open stance matchup. Talia Santos, it's got some real good rear attacks, a good right hook, some decent kicks. Valentina Shevchenko is a southpaw and one that's very quick on the trigger. She's got a good left straight, good movement. Of course, has got a devastating left high kick that she knocked out Jessica I with. And the one I think I like the most is she's got a really good spinning back kick. When you're right-handed, it's the right way to go, and not only the more natural way, but it's to circle to the left. However, when you're facing a southpaw, though you're getting away from their left hand, you're moving right into that back kick. And Valentina's isn't a Dennis Seaver, real strong wind-up, break your floating rib type spinning back kick, but it is one that she's super accurate with. And I've seen her throw it normal, and I've seen her throw it as a jump spinning back kick. She also has a surprising spinning back fist. I think it's how tense she is. She's one of those fighters. She's not real loose and flowing like Prochazka in our main event. She's very tightly wound, and everything comes real hard and real quick. Not necessarily, if it's with a head kick or something, she will get a knockout, but she more cracks people just hard enough to make them really think about coming in. Also, even though Valentina Shevchenko is no super decorated grappler, quite a few of her fights lately has seen her take the other person down, keep the top position, and land some really nasty elbows. Especially with her Muay Thai background, she's good at getting power into them from different angles and stuff. She really likes to get a crucifix position. And she's also really good at her body lock takedowns and tosses and winding up kind of in a side control to where she's only a step or two away from having that crucifix. This is one of those ones where I think Talia Santos, having a kickboxing background, I think and being rangy, so she's going to be hard to get in on for a takedown, I think won't be Valentina's easiest title defense. And, she's got 20 fights herself. So only a few less mixed martial arts fights than Valentina has. The thing is so many of Valentina's fights have been at the title level, have been at 5 rounds. She's fought the who's who from, champs at the lower weight class like Joanna to champs at the higher weight class like Amanda Nunes, and was doing quite well at 135, actually, before they opened up the 125 weight class, just to show you how physically strong she is. So I don't think Santos's range will give her too much problems. I just think it will make her appear a little bit less dominant than she normally does. This one, being a title fight, of course, will go 5 rounds, which I believe will be Santos's first time doing that. And with her being not huge for the weight class, but bigger than the average, I think if the fight goes late, even if she is hanging in there, I think she could have a tough time with that. Whereas Valentina has done quite a few fights that have gone the distance, always seems to do good. Anybody that remembers her fights with Nunes, that was one of the things that people thought won her a couple of the rounds, was Nunes is kind of known to come out with heavy powers and then gas later on. And Valentina is in incredible shape and is really smart and is really good about not seeming a lot different in those last rounds. She may sometimes switch up the way she's going about things and more look to take people down and show her top game, but definitely a fighter that's just as dangerous late as she is early. I think Talia Santos' best route to victory is hoping she can get one of those big right hooks in the way she did on Joanne Calderwood. But we'll see how she deals with 5 rounds, how she deals with somebody the caliber of Shevchenko and dealing with a southpaw. It's those things that makes me think that the deck is kind of stacked against her. Obviously, we've seen some pretty crazy upsets this year, not just in boxing, but in MMA as well. So I wouldn't be shocked if Santos was able to get it, but I see another successful title defense for Valentina. And unless she can catch her and take her down, throw some elbows, I don't see this being a 2 minute demolition the way she's been doing it. But I don't necessarily see it going to decision either. What are your thoughts on this women's flyweight title fight, Lewis?
I think that Valentina Shevchenko, I think she's going to get it. Kind of like you said, Valentina, she has more experience than Talia when it comes to the UFC. She definitely faced a lot of her opponents. Uh, I don't know how it's going to play out. I'd like to see her get one of those spinning back fists. I think that'd be a cool way for a highlight knockout. If Valentina can, get this win, I think it would be cool to see her go up against Juliana Pena again and get that bantamweight belt since she's been here in the past.
I didn't know that they had fought. I do know she was at 35, but that makes sense that they would have ran into each other.
Yeah, but
It kind of sucks because they were talking about a potential fight with her and Rose, even though Rose, even going up to 25 would be real small compared to Shevchenko. But obviously now that she's lost her belt to Esparza, that seems like something that's not going to be in the near future.
that's definitely a fight I'd pay for.
So you're going with Shevchenko by KO then, Lewis?
Maybe not KO. I would like to see a KO or TKO, but yeah, I'm gonna have to go with her. I don't see Talia putting her away. Yeah, I think Valentina, she's just too tough. But yeah, I'm betting on Valentina.
Nice. That brings us to our main event, which of course is Glover Teixeira, 33-7. I believe he recently turned 42 years old. So, from what I understand, he is the oldest champion to win the belt for the first time. We've had some fighters like Randy Couture that have gained a championship in their mid 40s, but they had already previously been champions. As far as winning the belt for the first time, Glover Teixeira is the oldest. And it was only his second title fight. The first time was against John Jones almost a decade ago. One that he made it the distance in, just wasn't quite ready for what Jones was putting out and stuff. And of course, had a real impressive showing, and also not the best showing for Jan Blachowicz. Blachowicz, for those that remember, was just coming off defending his belt against Israel Adesanya, and probably his most impressive win to date. But Glover is just, stayed real fundamental, took the shots like he normally does, came back with a good left hook, and seemed like he just got Blachowicz worried just enough about that. And then once he took him down, the cool thing about a guy that's real meat and potatoes top game in jiu-jitsu is that they always go for the same thing, so they tend to be real smooth with those transitions. You can tell he's a guy that's real heavy on top. Really solid submissions, really strong, good at mixing in the ground and pound to get the guy to move if he doesn't feel like the guy's open enough for a submission. What's strange about this fight is Jiri Prochazka. If I'm correct, this is only his third fight in the UFC. Obviously, since John Jones left the light heavyweight division, it's been a bit open. You had Jan Blachowicz knock off a couple of big contenders, even Adesanya coming up from 85. And Yuri, though he's only had a couple fights, has had a tough road. He was the Rising Champ, where he debuted one of the best flying knees I've seen on a bigger guy. And his is not the kind that Aldo knocked out Cub Swanson with, and it's not the kind that you see um, a lot of bigger guys doing. His is, if you remember, it's the kind that Anderson Silva knocked out Carlos Newton in Pride with. For any of our older viewers that will remember that, it's the kind where you just jump and you bring your rear knee straight forward. Same kind that Michael Venom Page crushed the skull of Cyborg Santos with. A very athletic move. His first fight, he got put up against Volkan Uzdemir, who, if you remember his nickname, No Time, was a very dangerous knockout striker. And he seemed to not know what to do with Prochazka. Prochazka is real long and real big for the weight class, hits incredibly hard, and is extremely awkward. He's constantly doing weird things with his hands. He'll headbutt some of your jabs, which Lewis will pull out of his bag of tricks every now and then. He'll throw spinning elbows. He'll throw flying knees. He's got surprisingly quick head kicks for a guy of his size and stature. And then, of course, his second fight, which set him up for this title shot, he fought Dominic Reyes. And Dominic Reyes was coming off the loss to Jan Blachowicz, but Dominic Reyes got his notoriety by being John Jones's last title fight before he stepped away, and a lot of people, including me, thought that Dominic Reyes probably won that fight. Um, Jiri Prochazka was trading with Reyes early. He seemed good at dealing with southpaw, which is something you don't see as much high up in the weight classes as you seem to lower down. It seems like he's got a really good chin, and then you could tell he was hurting Reyes over and over again, even when he was getting off balance and getting leg kicked. Every straight he landed, every hook seemed like it was really hurting Reyes. And by the time Reyes was starting to get worn down, Prochazka was starting to step in close with elbows, one of which was a right elbow that he missed. Spun through, followed it up with a spinning elbow with his left. Right when Reyes was looking to stick his own left straight in there and face planted Reyes, I believe it was the second round, perhaps third. And so Brash is super dangerous, kind of got the European mystique almost in a way like Fedor did, where he's very samurai-esque, doesn't talk a lot, is very respectful, not into talking trash, seems to genuinely enjoy fighting. Is 28-3, even though he's only had 2 fights in the UFC. He has had a lot of fights and won titles outside the UFC in Ryzen, and always looked impressive. Always had good finishes. He has quite a high knockout percentage, which you don't always see in the UFC. The thing that concerns me with that is that makes me think he's not super well versed in submissions. The thing when handicapping this fight is that it's easy to see that Prochazka is younger, he's quicker, he's more dangerous on the feet, whereas Glover has kind of a simple jab, straight, left hook type boxing style. He does have a nice right hook that he'll pair with that left hook, kind of a right hook, left hook, like he caught Ryan Bader with back in the day. The thing is that that's a situation that Glover has found himself in all of the fights that have brought him to this spot. Not just beating Jan Blachowicz, but his fight against Thiago Santos, his fight against Anthony Lionheart Smith. All of these were fights where he was going up against younger, sometimes bigger, uh, heavier punching, more dynamic strikers. He kind of will lose the first and second round, kind of be getting picked apart. He stays real defensive. You can tell he's getting stung and getting hurt, but he never really makes too big of a mistake. And it seems like the other guys, because your strikers at the higher weight classes tend to be real power punchers, they tend to overextend themselves looking for the knockout. And because these guys are cutting to 205, they're 230, 240-pound guys. Once they get 8 to 12 minutes of swinging as hard as they can and trying to take Glover out, they start fatiguing a little bit. And that's where Glover's technique and staying to the fundamentals really helps him, where he not only tends to start catching people with that left hook that he has, which is surprisingly good, but then when he takes them down, it seems like they're a bit shocked of how good his top game is and how strong he is. And grappling with him is one thing fresh, but when you're already kind of gassed yourself out and have started to take some punches, perhaps gotten wobbled by that left hook, it's a little different. As I said earlier, Glover is extremely patient, doesn't take any dumb chances. He's one of those guys that when he gets on top of you, it's pretty slim chance of you getting up until the bell rings to end the round. This is one of those ones where, with Glover being older and Prochazka being so powerful and so dynamic, I could see him catching Glover with a tough shot or something. The thing that concerns me for him is I could see Glover kind of stumbling and then just recovering and keeping on going. And Prochazka, perhaps, with this being a lot bigger of a show and being in the main event and a title fight and, this being everything he's worked towards, perhaps getting a bit carried away and going for the finish like he's gotten against everybody else. With me liking Prochazka, in his style, I am going to lean towards him a little bit, but it is going to be another 55-45 type situation. The cool thing about this fight is I see it most likely if the fight ends in the first 12 and a half minutes, I think it'll be Prochazka by some sort of knockout. If it goes past that midway point of the third round, I do think Glover is going to start taking over. And not even out of being out of better shape, just he doesn't exert himself the way most of these other guys do. He only throws shots that he thinks he can land. He only goes for really high percentage takedowns. When he gets on the ground, he's not rush look for the finish, let the guy get back up. So he's got to take the guy down again. Um, I could see Glover maybe getting Prochazka down early and showing some holes in his game and some of the experience he's got. And I could see there being a chance that maybe Glover feels like he just can't get in on Prochazka, especially if he cracks Glover hard a couple times early on and makes Glover really hesitant to come in. One thing that is on Glover Teixeira's side in this is that while he's not the most dynamic striker, he does train and has trained for a while with Alex Poetan Pereira, who not only is close to getting his own title shot, the weight class under in middleweight, and of course has the 2 wins over Israel Adesanya, one by knockout, but more impressively was a 2 weight division champion in Glory Kickboxing at middleweight and light heavyweight. And in Glory Kickboxing, the weight classes are exactly the same as the UFC. So he is used to guys that throw flying knees, guys that are long and rangy and big, but are real solid dynamic strikers. So uh, even that being said, I do think Prochazka will do some stuff he hasn't seen before, but at least we know he's getting some really good kickboxing rounds. Whereas I don't know if Prochazka is dealing with anybody that goes about it quite like Glover. But then again, it's going to be hard to find a training partner exactly like Prochazka. So I'm going to lean towards Prochazka. I think the youth and the hard striking might finally catch up. And Glover might not be able to overcome it this time, but certainly wouldn't be surprised if he's still around the third round. Prochazka's starting to get tired, and he finds a way to a takedown and a rear naked choke, perhaps that arm triangle choke he's gotten a lot of guys with. But could really see this one going either way. Could see it going to decision or going to a finish. A very even fight, and one I think will be really exciting. What are your thoughts on this main event, Lewis?
Oh, this was the hardest fight for me to bet on. I'm kind of with you where it's 45-60 or 65-45. I can see if it definitely goes to the ground. I can see Glover taking it. If it stays up, it wouldn't surprise me if Yuri takes it. Yeah, this was definitely the hardest fight for me to call. I have no idea what's going to play out. I usually go for the guy that has the jiu-jitsu background, but this one's just too tough.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that. So you're slightly leaning towards Glover then?
Yep, leaning towards Glover.
Okay, again, me and Lewis are split. We both think it's close, but Lewis is going with a hand retaining. For anybody that is trying to bet on this and get a parlay going, this is going to be a tough one that you're not going to want to put much money on. The cool thing is that all of these odds should be fairly even outside of the Shevchenko fight. If you do a parlay that's Shevchenko, Zhang Weili, and whoever you lean towards in the main event, if you want to touch that fight at all, there's a good chance it would be a decent amount of money that you'd be able to make. Perhaps throw in Kyochi for the boxing this weekend, but it's definitely not going to be the best boxing weekend unless you think you know something me and Lewis don't, or you have a fighter on here that you just like going for. It's not a lot of Mobsar Evluez like we had last week. For anybody that remembers our picks last time, me and Lewis were pretty close on a lot of them. I believe we got one wrong, maybe two on the MMA card, and then we correctly thought that Nayo Inoue would beat Nonito Donaire, although we certainly didn't think it would be as quick and with as devastating as a knockout as it was. And we were pretty torn on Haney and Kambosos. I did say there was a good chance of Haney outboxing him and getting a points decision just with him being the superior boxer and being a little more spry and a little bit more rangy and stuff. But I didn't see Haney taking it as cleanly as he did. Looking forward to seeing some new matchups coming in the 135 division. Hopefully, we can get to see Haney versus Tank, or maybe versus Lomachenko.
I seen Oscar De La Hoya. He's talking. He really wants. What was it? Haney to fight against Ryan Garcia. Is what I was seeing.
That would be a good one too. Those two actually fought in the amateurs.
Yeah.
When they were younger.
I seen Haney. He was saying that he wants to build his legacy. He doesn't care about followers. He wants to go after the tough fights. So I think that's pretty cool.
Well, he's certainly in the right weight class for it, and especially with him being young. You know, if you could get some names like Ryan Garcia, Tank Davis, Vasily Lomachenko, it would definitely be cool. And it'd be nice to see some of those matchups happening. We don't always get the best fighting, best in boxing, so it'd be really cool to see some of those matchups happen. And it seems like Haney is one of the few guys not looking to keep his record intact and just looking to make those good fights. That'll switch us over to boxing, where we have a couple fights, none of them too high profile. We have the WBA and the Ring light flyweight championships, which is Kiyobushi, longtime champion out of Japan, defending his belt against Bermudez. That one is on the zone. We also have Bryan versus Dubois. Dubois, if you remember, is a training partner of Tyson Fury, who I believe just retired unless he can get brought back in. Dubois, unfortunately, in his last fight, he had his orbital bone broken and caught some flack for taking a knee and quitting, some of which came from Billy Joe Saunders, who then karma seemed to come forward, got his own orbital bone broken by Canelo Alvarez and had to quit on the stool. Dubois, though, not to be counted out as big power. He's got some good training rounds in with Tyson Fury and I believe Anthony Joshua. And this fight will be for the WBA World Heavyweight Championship, which is one of the belts that Alexander Usyk was unfortunately forced to vacate. If you remember, about a third to a half of a year ago, they made the matchup between Anthony Joshua and Alexander Usyk, who was the unified cruiserweight champion, and came up, and I believe was the first unified cruiserweight champ, not only since Holyfield, but was the first one to come up to heavyweight and actually win all the titles like Evander Holyfield did. Unfortunately, anybody who's been following the news knows the situation in Ukraine, which has kept Vasily Lomachenko and Alexander Usyk and a couple of the other top fighters in boxing out of Ukraine out of the picture. So it would appear the WBA is the first one of Usyk's 3 titles that he won from Joshua to become vacated, and now Bryan and Dubois will be fighting for it, which adds an extra wrinkle. For a while, it looked like we were waiting for the Fury and Wilder trilogy to get done, and then we were going to make this huge fight with Anthony Joshua, which would have been a huge boxing match for England, and would have been cool to see somebody have all the belts since Tyson Fury won them before his 3-year layoff a while back. And then, of course, Usyk beat Joshua, so it's looking like we were going to get that rematch. Then the Ukraine thing happened, so Usyk is temporarily out. Joshua, I believe, is on the sidelines waiting for Usyk to come back to get a rematch with him. And so this is the first one of those championships to become vacated. It would be cool to see Dubois get it so that it stayed in England, perhaps setting up a fight between him and Joshua. But I could see Usyk coming back and perhaps taking that fight. It'd be interesting to see what happens because Usyk, while a very slick boxer, is obviously a bit undersized coming from cruiserweight. Also, then that one, of course, the Dubois fight will be on BT Sport or on Fight, F-I-T-E, which is a newer streaming service in the United States that will be playing some of the British boxing matches. Another one that we have that should be interesting is we have Jaime Munguia at super middleweight. He's been in some big fights, defending his belt, just fighting against Kelly Net for a belt. And then we also, another super middleweight, we have Edgar Berlanga versus Angulo. Berlanga is a very tough knockout puncher at super middleweight, which of course is the weight class that Canelo Alvarez cleaned out recently by beating Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant, Callum Smith, and all of the guys that were kind of holding on to belts and not really quite getting to fight each other. So Canelo made the rounds and fought all of them before taking that ill-fated try against Beagle for light heavyweight. I see Berlanga getting this done. He is coming up against better competition every fight, hopefully moving towards a title. Would be cool to see him against the Triple G, perhaps Canelo if he came back down, Also, we had David Benavidez, who looked very good against David Lemieux a couple weeks back. And with Canelo winning all those belts and then moving up, and now he is doing his third fight with Triple G, it kind of opens up that weight class. There's a couple guys on the sidelines. You know, you've got Charlo, who could be talking coming up at any minute. You've got Caleb Plant waiting around. Um, Billy Joe Saunders, I believe, has retired, but we still have Callum Smith and a couple other fighters. I don't know if he's going to stay at light heavyweight or not. So none of these fights being too big or too high profile, but at least there's multiple cards to switch back and forth from, and even one today, which is the Kyoguchi defending the WBA Ring Junior Flyweight Championships. On those, like most boxing matches, I'm gonna have to lean towards the favorites. I gotta say, I don't know much about Brian, who appears to be the favorite in the Dubois fight. He's 22-0. Definitely something I need to reacquaint myself with. Dubois, I do know is coming off that injury, but Dubois is a real scary, dangerous power puncher. And his last fight, I felt like he just came up with somebody with a much better jab and had that eye injury. So I'm going to go with Dubois, but that's only because of my lack of knowledge about Brian. Obviously, for the one tonight, I'm going to go with Kyoguchi. He's been a long-time champion, one of the guys from Asia that's in a smaller weight class, kind of like Inoue. And even compared to Inoue, this guy doesn't get the credit he deserves. It's kind of similar to in the UFC, where a lot of people are always focused on heavyweights in the higher divisions, where sometimes you get a lot more action and a lot more technical boxers at the lower weight classes. And then Berlanga, I know there's still a lot of questions about, but from what I've seen from, he's a real hard-nosed super middleweight, really got some power. I do see him beating Angulo, and that about does it for what we have for boxing MMA for this weekend. Be sure to join us for next week, where we will be breaking down not only the UFC Fight Night card, but we have the light heavyweight unification bout in boxing between Beterbiev and Smith Jr. Smith Jr., if you remember, is the one that knocked Bernard Hopkins out of the ring. And Beterbiev was one of the two scary guys at light heavyweight, along with Bivol, that everyone wanted to see Canelo Alvarez fight. This fight will be for every title aside from the one that Bivol was able to defend against Canelo Alvarez. Bivol had the WBA. Canelo challenged for it. Bivol, of course, won in an upset and kept his belt. So whoever wins between Beterbiev and Smith will have the WBC, IBF, and WBO, and will most likely end up fighting Bivol, seeing as how Canelo will be doing his third fight against Triple G. Whoever wins this fight will fight Bivol and have all of the titles at light heavyweight, which would not only be awesome to see another unified champ and finally have one champion in the weight classes, kind of similar to like we have in the UFC, but also to see who comes out between some of the upper echelon guys at light heavyweight. As we told you to start off with, me and Lewis will be attending a jiu-jitsu tournament tomorrow in Denver that I will be competing in. Hopefully, we will come back with good news and some funny stories from that. We are going to try to make it back on time so that we can do a live fight companion watch along party for the main card of the UFC, at least for the main three between Zhang Weili, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Valentina Shevchenko defending her belt against Talia Santos, and the main event between Glover Teixeira and Jiri Prochazka. So wish us luck on things going fast, and hopefully you guys will join us tomorrow for some commentary in case you guys are getting sick of Joe Rogan and them. I know I certainly am. That about does it for today. Lewis, you got any final messages for our listeners out there?
Nope, just hit that like and subscribe button.
Yes, please do that for us. And we're just starting out. We really appreciate every viewer that we get. We've noticed our numbers slowly growing. We know there's a lot of different choices out there. We may be for you, we may not be, but we appreciate you giving us a shot. And at least you can get the point of view from a couple guys that are actually competing in some of these sports, and hopefully a little more entertaining than the rest.
Yeah, and leave some comments too. We want to hear what your picks are. It helps us out too.
Yeah, absolutely. Be sure to give us any criticisms that you can helpful if possible to let us know other stuff you want us to break down or things you want us to add or to take out. After all, we were doing this for you guys. That about does it for this episode of the Fights Tonight podcast. Everybody, we'll see you tomorrow for the fights. Cross your fingers that we have some good ones. Later.
Peace.